It's free of charge. So we want to thank you so much for joining us and being a part of it. We do have some housekeeping information to start off with. So as we go through the conference, just know you are in listen only mode, and we ask everyone to please keep your cameras off while we're in the conference. During the breakout sessions, you may have a question and answer period, and you may be able to turn your camera on at that time. But for the most part, to help keep bandwidth at a low capacity, if you'll just leave your cameras off, and we will do that as well when we're not speaking, we will leave our cameras off as well. And everyone is in mute mode as well. We do have the chat feature, so please feel free to use that method as well. I do want to, for those of you who were not able to join yesterday, I hate that you missed the first day of the conference and missed the great presentation that we had. But the great thing about our conference, we are posting everything to our website. So you see the screen here, that is from the partnerships website in the conference page. And we already have the day one recording and the actual handouts from the presentation available as well. So when we're done with day two, we will get that information posted as quick as possible. I can't thank our board members, Autumn Cox, enough to say that that she's worked tirelessly hard to get those posted for the website as fast as we can. So I am now going to minimize our screen again, and oh, I was not even sharing. So let me pull up the page again. As here's the website, we have the recording listed, and then we have the three handouts that was provided at yesterday's session. So again, those are on the website. So thank you so much again, Autumn, for keeping those up to date on a daily basis as we get those posted. A few more reminders for folks. So just know when we go to breakouts later today, and even when we go during lunch, we want you to stay in the room, stay logged in through your link, because each time you leave the conference, you may or may not get credit for the CEU. So we want to make sure that you're housed in the conference at all times. And for those of you that if you're logged in using a telephone number, if you have the ability to change the telephone number to your name, please do so, because we want to make sure that we're getting you the credits as well. And just know also, Allison will reach out to anyone, Allison Crossman, who is our host for this event. And again, I have to thank AARP and Lisa Regal and Steve Hahn for getting us connected to Allison to host this event. So I want to thank them again, but Allison will reach out to anyone who has a telephone number listed so that she can make sure that she gets your name to match up to that telephone number. So again, just know, stay in the room or stay logged in when you do go to breaks, when you go to the breakout sessions, and when you go to lunch. So just leave the feed up. We will give special instructions when we're going to the breaks today. So just make sure you're paying attention. And we hope it's a great event for everybody, and we hope you have a great time. And we have a wonderful lineup of speakers today. And I know this morning we have some great folks. We do have a video from the governor and some others. So I need to see, is Joyce Massey on with us now? I would like to turn it over to Joyce to make a special presentation. So Joyce, if you're there, if you want to turn on your camera and then turn on your mic. I do want to thank Allison. Just know that we are recording all sessions again, as we mentioned. If someone can help me find Joyce on the list and we can get Joyce logged in. Catherine Lanier, were you able to get Joyce the link? If you can text and just let me know. Okay, we are still waiting on Joyce to come in. So, Allison, do you have any special announcements that you want to give to the group while we're waiting for everybody? Okay, so again, we'll give Joyce just a second. And Ann Elmore, who is the chair for our conference, Ann and Tadra. But Ann, do you have any announcements that you wish to make while we're waiting for just a brief moment?
Yes, thank you very much. We would, both Tadra and I on the Education Committee, welcome your suggestions in chat for speakers for the upcoming year. At our general sessions, we bring in speakers on a variety of topics, and the goal ultimately is to empower each of us to move forward, stronger, better, faster. So if you have any suggestions for speakers for upcoming meetings or topics, please enter that into the chat. We welcome your suggestions and look forward to seeing you at our meetings. We welcome members, but you don't have to be a member. You're more than welcome to attend our meetings to see what we're all about. We would be delighted to have each and every one of you. Tadra, did you have anything to add?
No, not at all. Just I second what Ann says. We're always happy to have great speakers and people to talk about topics that we.
Okay. Ann, thank you, and Tadra, so much for all that you did. And I do want to just thank everybody from the partnership, from the board. I know that everybody really has worked tirelessly to make this conference happen. Just know that we are an all volunteer board, and we have been working tirelessly to get this underway. I know we may have some small hiccups here, but we're trying to get all the links and the speakers online, but give us just a second here to. What I do want to go ahead and we'll go ahead and we'll go to, we're going to, Allison, let's go ahead and if you will, let's bring up the governor's video. I do want to again thank Governor Cooper for taking time to give us a video today for him. I do want to read really quickly that, as you all know, Governor Cooper has spent nearly 3 decades in public service, protecting families, keeping communities safe, and working to create jobs and improve schools. The son of a school teacher, he knows that education creates opportunity, and he has worked throughout his career to strengthen our schools and create a sound foundation for our state's children. In 2000, the people of North Carolina elected Roy Cooper as Attorney General, where he continued to fight for families during his 4 terms. He cracked down on child predators, worked to increase penalties for drug dealers, and oversaw a sharp decrease in crime. He partnered with law enforcement and school administrators to make schools safer and help protect victims of domestic violence and stalking. He also made protecting consumers a priority, fighting to keep utility rates low, put predatory lenders out of business, and help families fend off telemarketers. Roy Cooper believes in the potential of our great state and it's the people. He knows that we can build a state and an economy that works for everyone by investing in our public schools and giving students the tools they need to succeed, creating good jobs and raising incomes for the middle class and strengthen our communities. North Carolinians can live and work in places they are proud to call home. At this time, Allison, if you will play the video from Governor Cooper.
Hi, everybody. Governor Roy Cooper here. In 2019, more than 30,000 reports of abuse and neglect of vulnerable and older adults were made to departments of social services statewide. That's tragic. Now, during Older Americans Month, we're highlighting efforts to end adult abuse in our communities. This pandemic has impacted our mental as well as our physical health, and many of our vulnerable adults have been isolated over the past year. As we emerge from this pandemic, it's important for all of us to find ways to support them. My budget proposal to the legislature strengthens the programs that serve vulnerable adults, and I hope you will encourage your representatives and senators to support it. I also appreciate the collaborative efforts among our social services, law enforcement, health providers, and others to help our older adults live lives of purpose and abundance. Thank you for all you do to prevent and respond to adult abuse. Keep up the great work. Thanks.
Wow, wonderful words from our governor. We appreciate all the efforts that he has done, and great message to hear with the information about the budget. That is amazing. And we hope that continues to pass through our legislature and where he will be able to sign it for us. At this time, I do want to ask Joyce Massey Smith if she would turn her camera on. I want to turn the presentation over to Joyce just for a second. And she's got a special presentation. If you want to turn your camera on and Joyce, I believe you should be good to go.
Well, let me apologize. I am so sorry. I didn't have the right link to get with you guys. And so thanks, Kevin. I expect you were like the preacher at the funeral waiting for the body to arrive. So thank you so much. I wanted to take this opportunity and appreciate this opportunity to present the partnership with our one of our annual awards in aging and adult services. The Dorothy Crawford Award is presented. This is the second awarding of the Dot Crawford Award. If you don't know Dot's name, she was the director of the Madison County Department of Social Services for over 38 years. She was a lifelong advocate, and after Dot retired, as we know her so well, she began her advocacy work on behalf of very vulnerable adults and was a member of the North Carolina Senior Tar Heel Legislature. And Dot had a way to convince you that you could do it. And she convinced so many folks, so many seniors, and so many of us as those in the field that we could make change, that we could make something happen. And Dot never held a high elected office or was an academician. She was a woman who was strong and who carried her age with grace. And I'm sad to say that Dot passed away last year at the age of 102. Dot's motto was "Keep on keeping on." And so it's such a pleasure to present this award to the partnership. And the award recognizes an organization or entity, individual that has excelled in the work of promoting protection of vulnerable adults, either through adult protective services or guardianship. And the partnership is doing amazing work, has done amazing work. And just by virtue of this conference today, knowing that you have over 300 people here with you virtually, and that grew from a small group of folks tying purple ribbons to share on Advocacy Day at the legislature and handing out bottles of water to this with statewide experts, national experts, bringing to you an outstanding conference, and always, always being in place to advocate for vulnerable adults. And so it is our pleasure to present this award to the partnership. We will mail you the award. I'm sorry we can't give it to you virtually, but do remember that for those of you who are on the front lines, this is also for you. The people who do this work every day, as Dot did this work every day. And the other thing I would like to point out, that this is the first award that the division has presented in honor of a woman. And we thought it was about time. And so with the work that women do in the field of social work and the helping professions and care and law enforcement, we honor you with this award as well. So thanks, Kevin. And we will be mailing you the award. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Joyce. This is such an honor. I knew Dot personally, and she was an amazing, strong individual. And it's such an honor for the partnership to receive this award. Um, I know her motto, and I try to live by that daily, keep on keeping on. She was a tremendous individual. I do want to ask those that are on the board, if you want to turn your camera on, we want to see your faces. And this is to all the folks on the board. Thanks for their hard work. And it's a great honor. I know this is the second year that this award has been given out, and we all accept it as a great honor of what we have been doing and we are continuing to do. And you're right, as we started out at a small meeting and we were tying those ribbons, and then we met to form at the senior center to talk about, let's try to get some bylaws going and creating. And now we've got over 317, I think, totally registered for the conference. So it is a great force to be reckoned with, and it's a great board to work with. And I want to thank those who have come before us, even before. I know Joan Pelletier, who was on the board and she's retired, but she still continues to volunteer. She's done a great effort, but we've got many individuals who have been a part of the partnership and are continuing to be involved, and it's great. And we thank the Division of Age and Adult Services for extending this award to us. We graciously accept it. And Joyce, I know we'll be hearing from you here in just a little bit, but thank you again for being with us today and joining us for this occasion. Thank you. At this time, I'm actually going to turn around and I want to now introduce our next speaker, Josh Stein, who was sworn in as North Carolina's 50th Attorney General in 2017. As Attorney General, he's focused on protecting North Carolina families from crime and consumer fraud. Stein has made combating the opioid epidemic a top priority. His office drafted the STOP Act to reduce the number of people who become addicted to opioids through smarter prescribing practices. The HOPE Act, which gives law enforcement additional tools to stop the flow of prescription pain pills into the drug trade, and the Synthetic Opioid Act to crack down on the trafficking of illicit fentanyl. All three laws were passed by the General Assembly and signed into law by Governor Roy Cooper. Stein is leading the effort to identify, track, and test untested sexual assault kits. Testing these kits will help law enforcement identify and prosecute criminals, prevent future crimes, and bring closure to victims. As Attorney General, Josh Stein has worked to protect taxpayers, seniors, students, military families from fraud. His Department of Justice won awards or settlements of more than $80 million from scam artists. He is working to improve data security and is leading a national effort to combat robocalls. Yes. Additionally, his office has recovered nearly $50 million from tax cheats and healthcare providers defrauded Medicaid over the past 2 years. Stein is focused on protecting our state's natural resources. He opposes offshore oil drilling along North Carolina's coast and fights to ensure that polluters are held accountable to clean up the messes they create. Stein previously served as a state senator and senior deputy attorney general in the North Carolina Department of Justice. In those roles, he successfully led efforts to put more violent criminals behind bars by expanding the state's DNA database, wrote the School Safety Act and Identity Theft Protection Act, worked to protect kids from online sexual predators, and helped run payday lenders from charging loan shark interest rates out of state. Stein grew up in Chapel Hill, is a graduate of Dartmouth College, and earned law and public policy degrees from Harvard University. He and his wife, Anna, have 3 children who all attend or attended North Carolina public schools like Anna and he did. Please welcome our North Carolina Attorney General, Josh Stein. Attorney General, you may be muted. Oh, somehow we have lost the Attorney General. Maybe we're getting him back.
I was going to say, hi, this is Mercedes Rostucha-Clem. I'm an Assistant Attorney General with the Public Protection Section at the Department of Justice, and I thought that I would jump in real quick until we can see if we can't get the Attorney General on the line. Uh, I believe he might be having some technical issues. Just so everybody knows, at the Department of Justice, the way it's set up, we have, with respect to elder abuse and the way that we have it set up is that we have a public protection section and also our consumer protection section, which are two technically separate sections that work on separate issues. So in our consumer protection section, there is a small unit that focuses on senior consumer protection and financial abuse in the civil arena. So anytime we hear of any type of financial exploitation by either, typically our consumer protection section will act when there's a business involved as opposed to a family member, because it'll take a civil action against a business under the Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act, which is Chapter 75 of our general statutes. And so that is one way that our consumer protection section works with addressing elder abuse, adult abuse. We also have our, there's technically three sections, excuse me, our Medicaid investigation division, which investigates Medicaid providers for Medicaid fraud. And that can also look like adult abuse, neglect, and exploitation and financial exploitation. And so those investigations primarily take place, again, take complaints directly from individuals or providers, but the investigations are typically against providers that are exploiting the Medicaid system or the Medicare system. And then lastly, the section that I work in is our public protection section. And I'm sure I've met a ton of you guys, and I'd love to meet you guys more. We are working on different policy issues that could better the adult protection system. And then in addition, we do presentations and outreach on behalf of our consumer protection section with respect to scams and frauds and consumer issues. And so all that to say, can keep talking. Unless our Attorney General has joined. I'm not sure I see him. Please interrupt me.
Mercedes, I see he is not back online with us yet, but would you like to just mention about the toll-free number that folks can call in to report scams?
Yes, sir, that's perfect. I will do. So it's a 1-877-5-NO-SCAM, NOSCAM. Again, that's 1-877-5-NO-SCAM. And then you can also file a complaint online. If you go to our website, ncdoj.gov/file a complaint, or just our main homepage, right at the very top, there's a big bold red button that says file a complaint. And we take complaints on a host of consumer issues. In 2020, the top reports that came out, we had, I want to say it was over 31,000 consumer complaints that came in. And the large majority of those were, over 10,000 of those, so a third of those were telemarketing and robocalls. And so we know that robocalls has been an ongoing issue, and that our seniors community is very vulnerable and targeted in that respect. And so in 2020, it was very much overshadowed by COVID, but the Department of Justice did start a robocall task force. And so there's a phone number, I believe that phone number is 1-888-NO-ROBOCALLS that you can, and I'll put those numbers in the chat here after I get off, but that where you can kind of report any type of like really insidious robocalls that you feel the need to report. What happens when people make those reports is that the number will get reported to our federal partners at the Federal Trade Commission, and they're maintaining kind of a database. It'll get shared with the telecom companies. There's a host of kind of like 12 telecommunication companies that it gets shared with. They're also kind of maintaining a database. And then our state, our consumer protection keeps track of those numbers as well, and trying to identify, patterns and practices. It's difficult with using phone numbers because we all know that the phone numbers can be spoofed very easily using computer technology, and that kind of the technology is always changing on that front. But there is, Attorney General Stein does kind of lead up a bipartisan task force, a bipartisan group of attorney generals that are working with the telecommunication companies to work with federal regulations in order to stop those robocalls from becoming as disruptive as they have been. I don't know if y'all have noticed, but I've noticed in the last year or so that the technology on my cell phone at least has gotten a lot better, where it will identify, a scam caller or risk call. And so that is something that has changed over the years, I think, as a result of the regulation changes that we've been working on.
That's awesome, Mercedes. Yes, and I totally agree with you. It felt like during the pandemic, we got less calls from those telemarketers. So it's a shame that the telemarketing world for the scammers couldn't stay in the pandemic world, where we can keep our phones where we need them and only receive from individuals. I know sometimes I've received calls from myself. So it's, nerve-wracking when you look down at your phone and you see yourself calling.
It's real. It's not only nerve-wracking, it's really frustrating. It's disruptive to daily life. And what I found really frustrating is that, somebody said in the comments, we got more during the pandemic. With how some of the counties were rolling out waiting lists, and some of the providers were rolling out waiting lists for testing and vaccines, and you had to wait for a call back, right? And so all this time we're telling people, stop answering the phone. If you don't recognize the number, often you're having to answer the phone to make sure you can get that appointment. And so it was difficult. And Ms. Morse there is right. It got worse, I think, over the pandemic. And we know that reports on all fronts, when it came to scams, the FTC and to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children that handles kind of cyber abuse and cyberbullying, those complaints also doubled. So I think complaints on all fronts doubled, and it's been a real situation.
Mercedes, thank you very much. I think we actually have our Attorney General with us. So Attorney General Stein, if you want to turn your video on and unmute yourself, we would love to hear from you.
I'm right here, Kevin. Thank you. I've spent the last 5 minutes unsuccessfully trying to register for this, but then I saw there was a direct link. So here I am. Appreciate y'all's patience. Apologies. Thank you all for having me. I wish you a good morning. I do wish we could be together in person, but I think that day is coming very soon, and I'm extremely excited about it. It is fairly remarkable to think about the last 14 months and how the world has changed. We've had a year unlike any other, the deadliest public health pandemic, the worst unemployment, a long overdue reckoning on racism, and then an assault on our democracy. We're finally starting to see this hope that brings smiles to our faces. In 2021, vaccines are rolling out, the weather's getting warmer, flowers are blooming, but clearly as a nation, we have a lot of challenges, and those challenges all impact the work we do at the Department of Justice, just as I'm sure it impacts yours as well. I've taken a look at the program you all have today, and I hope you find it a productive use of your time and that you all learn a great deal. Like you, I've seen far too many instances when elderly are being taken advantage of. And I want to thank each of you for your commitment to working on behalf of our parents and grandparents across the state. As y'all know all too well, elderly are often the targets of scams and abuse. There are a number of reasons for that. Some are that the elderly simply have more money, more savings, because they've been working all their lives. The elderly are more likely to be retired, so they're home and have extra time. They are more polite than younger people and are more likely to hear someone out before cutting them off. And they may be more trusting or easily confused by someone who pressures them. All of these reasons make seniors targets, which means that our work to protect them is critically important. At the North Carolina Department of Justice, protecting the elderly typically occurs within 3 of our divisions. The Consumer Protection Division, which includes the Public Protection section that Mercedes serves in, the Health and Human Services Division, and Medicaid Investigations Division. In the Consumer Division, we protect seniors from fraudsters and scammers. And since I've been on the job, our department has secured more than $200 million in settlements and awards on behalf of North Carolina and its people. One type of assault on us that I'm concerned about are robocalls. Many of the scams we see originate through the telephone. We receive more complaints about robocalls than any other issue. Last year, in fact, it was over 10,000 complaints. There's some data that we just saw that showed that North Carolinians are the second most likely state in the nation to answer the phone, even to an unknown number. Simply put, we are too polite, but it has real consequences for our people. So one of the best messages that we can share with vulnerable populations, the ones that you serve, is this: do not answer the phone if you don't know the caller. If it's important, the person will leave a message and you can call them back. But this answer to robocalls, really, it shouldn't be the burden on victims. I think the phone companies should do better jobs protecting their customers. So I led a group of 51 attorneys general to negotiate a series of anti-robocall principles that we negotiated with the largest phone companies to prevent robocalls from coming to your phone in the first place, as well as to have the phone companies partner with law enforcement like attorneys general so that we can hold the wrongdoers accountable. And that's what I'm doing in Texas right now, a robocaller I've taken to court. If any of you have gotten any calls about a car warranty, well, this guy, he was one of the worst offenders of that scheme, made some 75 million phone calls into North Carolina alone. And we look forward to litigating that case. But in the meantime, he may not make any phone calls into North Carolina while the case is continuing. The next aspect of our strategy is to go after the phone companies themselves. These tend to be the smaller phone companies that profit. They make fractions of a penny on every call by turning a blind eye to the illegal traffic on their system. So stay tuned for that regard. I'd like to identify some of the common scams we frequently see here at the Department of Justice so that you can be aware of red flags and different scenarios to share with your constituents. The first is the grandparent scheme. This is when con artists will try to take advantage of the fact that grandparents will do practically anything for their grandchildren. And typically these scams begin with a phone call from a person who claims to be a grandchild in trouble who needs money right away. And the grandparent will reflexively say the person's name, "Billy, is that you?" And that gives the scammer some information they need in order to sound authentic and to finish the con. In other cases, the criminal already knows the child's name from social media. And the criminal always says, "Don't tell my parents, don't tell my parents, you can't tell my parents, just send me the money, send me thousands of dollars, or send gift cards." And that's obviously red flag number one. If anybody ever calls to ask anybody to send them gift cards, it is a scammer. It is a scammer. So to prevent grandparent scams, never answer the phone if you don't recognize the number. As I said earlier, be aware of anyone who asks you to send money immediately, no matter the reason. Don't share information about you or your family with anyone who calls, emails, or contacts you through other means. They can use that against you. If you get a call or message asking for help, hang up and contact the person directly using the number you have for them. If it's Billy, hang up and call Billy directly. And then you'll find out more than likely that it wasn't Billy who called you. If someone claims to be a loved one, ask the person questions that only a family member would be able to answer. Never wire money or buy gift cards in response to a phone call, email, or online message. Once the money's gone, it is almost impossible to get back. Another scam that we hear about regularly targeting seniors is the sweetheart scam. And this is when the con artists prey on lonely people by pretending to fall in love with them to win their trust and steal their money. Sometimes they even watch for obituaries in the newspaper or online to target widows or widowers. They frequently create fake identities on dating websites and social media. The scammer will often claim to be a US citizen traveling or working overseas, for example, in the military or as a teacher or as a nurse. I've seen, I'm an oil man on an offshore oil rig. They will ask to move the conversation from social media to email or text messaging so they can have more control over the conversation. Sweetheart scammers are consistently positive and upbeat, and they present this facade of unconditional love that is comforting to somebody who's lonely or sad. And they may cultivate that relationship for months before asking for the money. The con artist then convinces the victim they're in deep, committed relationship during this grooming process, and then they will ask for money, usually for 3 reasons. They need airline tickets to come and visit the United States. They need bribes that must be paid before they can leave a country. They have communication costs like phone bill or internet access. They may have school tuition, a temporary financial setback, a professional crisis that results in a loss of money, urgent medical expenses, or to help them recover from robbery or a mugging. And once the money is paid, the scammer will promise to come to the US to continue the relationship in person, and it will just continue over and over. They will keep coming up with excuses and reasons why they can't make it, but why they need more money. And you can imagine that when the victim discovers that they've been a victim of this fraud, it is doubly devastating. Not only have they lost so much money, but they experience profound grief at the loss of a relationship that they thought was real. And they're so embarrassed, they often don't even want to tell anyone about it. The best ways to prevent those kinds of scams is just skepticism. You do not know who it is who contacts you or who you reach out to on the internet. Be skeptical. Be wary of anyone you don't meet in actual real life, and even then you can be suspicious. And never send money to someone you haven't met in real life in person. COVID-19 has been incredibly devastating for our state and nation for the past 14 months, but it has also been devastating to a number of people who have lost money through scams. Scammers will use anything, including a global deadly pandemic, to steal money. So we're seeing scammers use robocalls, texts, and social media to sell a space in line for a vaccine when you couldn't get one. Now anybody can get one. Promising miracle cures, bogus tests, contact tracing, and posing as the government to try to steal people's economic impact payments. So the tips to avoid these kinds of scams are very similar. It's just be skeptical. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Watch out for high-priced or low-quality products. We saw that with hand sanitizers and masks. Don't let anyone rush you. If someone says it's now or never, that means it's never. Do not feel subject to their pressure. Watch out for phishing emails. There's been a lot of emails saying you've been in contact with somebody who's contracted the coronavirus. Click this link to learn more. There's just been untold number of variations of that. And they ask you to submit information. The criminals will use that information to create fake identities and take out credit in your name, or they will directly steal money from you. If somebody claims to be with the government or an expert, hang up and then reach out to the organization directly. Call the county health department, call the state health and human services, whoever it is that they say they are, call them directly. They will not be legitimate. Look out for unauthorized or fraudulent charities. This is a time when people want to help others in need. So don't give money to somebody who contacts you with a good sounding charity name. Instead, research the organizations you like and give directly to them. And then one thing we can do is just educate ourselves. There's so much false information about COVID-19 on the internet. Stick with the reputable sources, the CDC, the WHO, the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. All of these organizations have useful information that can inform you and let you know what's going on. One thing we saw with COVID was price gouging, and we actually saw it some this past week. If you had trouble getting gas, as we all did, some of these gas stations, they dramatically raised their price to try to take advantage of people's desperation. We received more than 800 complaints about excessive gas prices last week. Well, during COVID-19, we saw a lot of complaints about toilet paper and hand sanitizer, masks, cleaning supplies, all of the things that people needed back in March and April last year. We had more than 2,000 complaints of those. So whether it's a hurricane, a winter storm, a gas shortage, or a global pandemic, if there's an emergency declared, price gouging is illegal. I took one company selling masks here in North Carolina, and they were charging outrageous sums. They were trying to make $30 million per transaction with Emergency Management, Duke Health, UNC Health System, and the Charlotte Red Cross. That company has agreed to a settlement, paid $250,000 fine, and will no longer violate North Carolina's state law. Consumer protection works to protect people from companies and scammers taking advantage of seniors directly, but there are other times when the seniors are mistreated or defrauded by residential or healthcare facilities. And we work with DHHS to defend their actions to assess penalties and or to deny, suspend, or revoke a facility's license when that facility is out of compliance with the law, often in terms of the way it treats its residents. We also provide training to county departments of social services on guardianship and adult protective services. And we also advise the Division of Aging and Adult Services, the Social Services Commission, on issues that can impact the elderly. And when the fraud on seniors involves the Medicaid program, my Medicaid Investigations Division can take action. So we will investigate and prosecute fraud and abuse committed by healthcare companies and providers, as well as patient abuse and neglect in facilities that are funded by Medicaid. One thing we did was Operation Root Canal, which was to go after dental providers that were defrauding the Medicaid program. We brought cases or took action against 10 dental providers and returned over $6 million back to Medicaid. In total, we've returned more than $120 million to taxpayers since I took office. Because when folks cheat the taxpayer, it forces all of us to pay more. It's not right, and I won't accept it. We accept tips from the public, and whistleblower complaints often result in action. So if you know of any facilities engaging in patient abuse and neglect, or any healthcare provider defrauding Medicaid, please report it to my office. I want to thank everybody for their attention this morning, but more importantly, I want to thank you for what you do to protect North Carolina's most vulnerable. I am excited to work with you, God willing, in the months and years to come, to build a North Carolina that is safer and stronger for all, including seniors. Thank you all for this opportunity this morning.
Attorney General, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to be with us today. As I am the director for the Senior Medicare Patrol Program, it's been great to work with those on your staff. I know Jeb Stewart, and then of course Laura Slawback, who is on our board with the partnership as well. So you have a great team there, and we appreciate all that they do and what you do to help keep the consumers and the citizens of North Carolina safe. So thank you again for taking your time today.
Kevin, have a great one.
You too. At this time, I do want to bring Joyce Massey Smith back on board with us. Joyce has been the director for the North Carolina Division of Aging. She is the director for the North Carolina Division of Aging and Adult Services. Previously with the division, she was a regional adult programs representative, chief of budget planning and system support, and adult services section chief. She also worked with Region I Area Agency on Aging, first as a planner, then the AAA director. Massey Smith has served in leadership positions with both the NC4A and the North Carolina Association of Aging and Disaster Services at Northwest North Carolina chapter of the American Red Cross. In March 2018, Governor Roy Cooper named her as part of the Interagency Council for Coordinating Homeless Programs. Massey Smith also served as staff support at the 1995 White House Conference on Aging. Massey Smith earned a Bachelor of Social Work from UNC Greensboro, as well as a Master's in Public Administration with a concentration in aging and public policy. Her professional interests include rural social work practice, performance outcome measurement in human services, and team development as a means of improving agency outcomes. So Joyce, thank you for coming back and talking with us today.
Well, thanks, Kevin, and thank you all. I wanted to give you some updates on what's going on at the department and the division level. And they tie right in with everything that the governor and Attorney General Stein had to share. And we do so appreciate our relationship with the AG's office and their folks that work with us. They are a critical part of our team as we try to support adult protective services and guardianship across North Carolina. So there's lots going on in our world as it relates to protecting vulnerable adults. Very exciting times for us. I believe as many of us have been sort of plowing this road for a really long time, hoping, working, dreaming that there would be resources and opportunities to really uplift this issue of adult abuse and get some attention and some resources and policy that will make a difference in the lives of the folks we try to serve. And so there's where I want to kind of focus today. But before I do, as Governor Cooper mentioned, and as you probably all know, May is Older Americans Month. So happy Older Americans Month to everyone. And we have an event that I want to share with you, a virtual event, of course, on Tuesday, May 25th at 1 o'clock, and I will send Kevin and team the link so that they may share it with you. We do all kinds of different things during Older Americans Month, but this year's theme, so fitting, is Communities of Strength. And what we decided to do is interview older adults from across the state to hear about their lived experiences and challenges and joys and wishes for the future for other North Carolinians. And the reason we chose to do that, it has a lot to do with what we've experienced in the pandemic. And at the very beginning, and thinking about just the impact of what was to come with this pandemic, I kept reflecting back to my elders and people who had lived and born and worked as members of the greatest generation. And you know who they are, and we've lost so many of them. But their resilience, their commitment to community and to supporting each other. I know you all have stories, and if you don't, go out and find an older adult that you can connect with and hear some of those stories about how they managed, both during the Depression and during the World War II. There was so much, yes, we can in that generation. And so that's where I found my peace and my space and my place to reflect on, what are you going to do today? How are you going to get through this day of people needing, protective equipment, people needing testing, now people needing vaccine. And so it's there we turn to our communities of strength. So on the 25th at 1, we will have a special video presentation of interviews with some of our greatest North Carolinians, and some names are known and some not. But I think you'll be enriched by participating in that, and we'll send that link. And also, as you'll probably talk about over the next day or two, June 15th is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And we've been given a lot of thought at the division about the boots on the ground, the DSS social workers who have been through just a traumatic year in trying to serve individuals in just very, very challenging times, and for all helping professionals who've been limited and trying to think about all the issues that folks have been dealing with, the social isolation, the concerns for our family caregivers who are struggling with working in that care and now maybe not working, and just the burdens and services in some places not being available because of the pandemic. Our adult daycare programs had to close down. And so all these things have just had an impact on our helping and on our network, our DSSs, our area agencies on aging, our local service providers, our healthcare providers. And so what I would say is what we're trying to achieve on June 15th. We have a national speaker who you will just love, who's going to talk about self-care, secondary trauma, and making time for yourself to provide that self-care that allows you to get up and go another day and do your best. And so we hope you will join us for that. I think you'll be really inspired and uplifted by that, and we'll send the link to that. But in terms of updates and what's going on at the department and at the Division of Aging and Adult Services, I'm really excited to come. For some of you, this will be an update, and for others, it may be very new information. But for many years, the division has been working and thinking and planning and proposing reform to our Adult Protective Services statute and the lack of state funding for county DSSs to carry out their APS role. And we had an opportunity, as has social services as an agency with child welfare through Ryland's Law, to consider reform for adult protective services. And we have been working with a group. First, they've changed names, but Center for Supportive Families, and now they're known as Public Knowledge. But we've been working with them on a plan and a vision for bringing in stakeholders and voices of families to look at what it is we need to do and what we need to focus on to improve our statutes, to improve funding streams and services. And one of the key focus one of our principles has been, let's not act like typical government. Let's act like people who are concerned about these individuals. As I say to the staff sometimes, that older woman at the end of the driveway, and how she feels about our intervention and how we treat her and her family as we do intervene in adult protective services, and step away and think about that and let that be our focus, and not worry and think about who's going to do what, but it's the what that needs to get done. So where we are with that is we've had 2 envisioning sessions where we invited in our DSS partners and our departmental leadership to think about focus areas. We had a second session in February where we honed in on sort of the priorities, and this was a broad range of stakeholders who touch this work and think about this work, who help guide and help us come to some goals and strategies. And I want to share just briefly with you where we landed on some of those things. There was an overwhelming agreement that training and support for county departments of social services needed to be better funded, better supported, and identify beyond, and you guys are doing this today, beyond what the law and policy say, but what are those real experiences that APS staff encounter every day, and how are we supporting them to meet the needs of the people they're working with. And so training and consistency of practice, and this is for those of you who've been around a while, this is an old joke in North Carolina. We have 100 counties, 100 kingdoms that tend to do things just a little bit differently. And what we heard from our stakeholders is that, you know, if I call this county, I might get this response, and I call that county and I get a little different response. And of course, we're never going to be, 100%, saying the same thing. But we do see that we can do some work around consistency of practice across each county, because it is my absolute firm belief and dedication to the fact that it shouldn't matter what county you live in. If you are a vulnerable person who's been mistreated, you deserve our best. And it's our job at the state level, in connection with our county DSSs and other partners, to make that happen. And so that's where we're spending some time to focus on. And then the other thing that I'm so excited to see that you're focusing on in this conference is the development and financial support for multidisciplinary teams in North Carolina. We believe that it's through that effort, and I've seen it happen up close and personal, when there is a multidisciplinary team working together with the focus of improving and protecting the lives of the folks that we're serving, there are much better outcomes. And so we will be saying more about how we want to support multidisciplinary teams going forward. But I think we have maybe close to 40 teams in North Carolina right now, and we want to see that go to 100. It won't be this year, but we want to make it happen in all 100 counties in the way that it works for that county. The other issue that we will be addressing, and we are clear and always in saying this, is that we need statutory reform. We can claim fame to be in one of the first APS statutes. You've heard me say this in the country, but our statute has not kept up with the kinds of people who need our services, and it's not open in the sense that we're allowed to do very much prevention at all, and that there may be some really much better ways to deal with cases of self-neglect and caretaker neglect. And so we want to really open up the statute, and it's going to take a while, but we're asking Governor Cooper for an executive order that would create a bipartisan task force to look at the law and policy. And we have the opportunity to bring in some experts from other states and from the national level to help us do that. And it's a long haul, but we finally have the opportunity to do that, and do it in a way that hopefully will have bipartisan support as we go forward. And the thing that that has to be part and parcel to any reform are resources to implement the reform. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but we promise you, particularly our DSS partners, that those two have to go hand in hand, that we can't create new demands or new things, additional things, without resourcing counties to carry those out. And it is a partnership. So we're very excited. We've finished the first body of work. We have a report that we'll be sharing probably in June on the work that we've done, the goals that we have, and the strategies of pulling groups together to work on all those issues, and also to work on what we would put in an executive order. So we're just very excited that we're at this time and place, and look forward to working with many of you over the next year or two to see some of this come to fruition. So the other good news, and why I feel like we're at a wonderful place, is the funding in the governor's budget for vulnerable adults. For the first time ever, the governor, any governor, has asked for direct funding for services dollars for APS clients, and we are calling that an essential services fund. And that would be resources for county departments of social services to use when there's no other resource available to protect an individual. Maybe it's medication, maybe it's some sort of home repair, maybe it's getting a home cleaned and in a place and make it a safe place for that individual. These funds won't cover everything, but it's our, sticking our toe in the water to say it's one thing to have a law that says you must protect these individuals, but do you have the resources to do it in your community? And we often hear that that's not the case. So we're excited to see that Essential Services Fund, and also funding for adult protective services staff at the local level. There, the proposal from the governor's budget is to have, I'll tell you the number in a minute, is to have 8.5 million recurring dollars to add staff at the local level. Now, 70% of that will be for child welfare staff and 30% for adult protective services staff. And so this is monumental in terms of state dollars for local DSS staff to carry out this work. And so we're very, very excited about that. And as the governor said, we hope you'll be talking to your legislators about these items. If you need more information from us to help inform your conversations, we are glad to provide it. But we need you, again, as advocates and leaders to go to bat with this session of the General Assembly to make sure that these resources are made available. Other things not directly related to APS, but are essential to protect people in a sort of a preventive kind of way, is we've created some new projects proposing in the budget around nutritional support. We know that senior hunger in North Carolina is a serious issue and directly impacts the health of older adults and their ability to care for themselves and care for their loved ones. And so we're proposing a project to provide funding and meal support for individuals coming out of the hospital for 2 weeks. And the data show that that's one of the greatest deficits when folks come out of the hospital and may not have caregivers there and available to make those casseroles. Their health declines again, and they're back in the hospital. And in that space, we know there can be some serious self-neglect if some of those resources aren't available. So we're very excited about that, and some other nutritional support that is in the governor's budget to help address the issue of senior hunger. Which we know has a direct impact on older adults and vulnerable adults' ability to care for themselves and maintain a healthier lifestyle. We're also seeing funding in the governor's budget for our housing assistance program. That is a rental assistance program for persons with disabilities and low income. And funding is in the budget for that program, which again supports vulnerable adults. Also, additional funding for the Older Americans Act programs through the Home and Community Care Block Grant. So we're very excited that these are all state dollars and recurring dollars to support our network. The other thing that I want to talk to you about is the federal funding that we've received through 2 bills so far at the federal level. There was an Appropriations Act. It's called the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 that we received funding in January and February, or notification. And in that, we received an additional $5 million for home delivered meals and nutritional support. We received $2.8 million for adult protective services, and our plans for those funds are in the works right now. But a big part of that will be building our technology to be able to offer the training that's already been identified as a need among our county departments of social services, and building a training platform that supports everything from registration and keeping up with your credits, and and bringing in the experts virtually from all over the state and the country to provide that very specialized training that counties need. The other piece of that is also our data. We are very limited in the system that we currently have in terms of collecting data around APS, and we are compliant and participating in the National Adult Maltreatment Reporting System, but we want to strengthen that. There are several data elements that we just don't collect. We don't know about perpetrators, for instance. We don't collect, we would say, anything really about perpetrators, and also, tracking outcomes for folks. We get information on the front end of, that a case was screened in, evaluated, and protection either needed and provided or not, but we don't know what happens after that. And we need to be able to know what's effective and working as a practice of APS. And so we hope with that, those resources. And then we're also allocating a portion of that funding for that Essential Services Fund that we hope will be able to combine with what we hope the General Assembly and the governor will agree on in the state budget, and combine those federal and state dollars to provide that much needed support to counties. The other area, and let me check on my time here. The other area that we're focusing on is the American Rescue Plan Act, which provided an unheard of amount of funding at any one time for aging and adult services. Our state received, our division, and this is not all the other dollars that the department and the governor and other departments within state government have received through the American Rescue Plan, but we received at the division $43 million to enhance and expand some of our Older Americans Act programs, and we are working very hard to try to ensure that we are doing some things that within the requirements of the Older Americans Act, but that reach those people that we've not been able to reach before. And we're looking at it all through a health equity lens, because we know that there are so many people in our communities who are left out because of the color of their skin or the language they speak or where they live. And we believe it's our job, and we believe that President Biden has charged us to do that. So that will be the focus of that work. And also, obviously, increasing access to vaccine. And we're getting really close on the vaccine front for older adults, but there are so many people that are homebound or isolated who still need the vaccine. So we'll be spending some of those resources there. The other piece of the ARPA funding provides for caregiver support. And again, we're proposing some very creative work there, hoping that we can really make a difference for family caregivers. And through working with our AAAs, there's additional funds for supportive services, and those range from, you know, transportation to in-home support, in-home aid. And so we're really excited about this opportunity. And one of the concerns that folks have when they see this one-time funding is, what will we do when the money runs out? And, you know, in my role as division director, it is my charge to our staff, and the message to our AAAs and our DSS is, it's our job to find the replacement, to keep this going. We, you know, I joke and say, well, if we, you know, if we don't take all this money, you know, maybe it'll go to the Defense Department. We have to use this as the launching board to change how we serve vulnerable and older adults in North Carolina. And it's an opportunity that doesn't come around very often. And so I hope we'll all be mindful of that as we receive and implement programs and services, planning for the future, that be the normal, that be the reality of what we're able to do for older adults. So those are the big funding pieces. There are some funds in the American Rescue Plan for adult protective services in the Ombudsman program. And with the Ombudsman program, we've already received a small amount of funding, $123,000, and that's going to be used to support the Ombudsman staff with the additional calls and complaints, as you can imagine, that have happened and continue to happen as a result of COVID and visitation issues. And in the American Rescue Plan, there is funding for states for APS and the Ombudsman and elder justice work, but we don't have the North Carolina allocation yet or the program instructions. And so when we know that, we'll be sharing that with our advocacy and other partners as we develop plans to implement those programs and use those resources. So I would say that it is a time when we're all really, really tired. It's been a long year, but I see so much opportunity, and the energy that all 317 of you bring to this, as well as many other folks across the state. We can make a difference, and doing it together, I'm just absolutely confident that we will be successful. And like I said, if you have questions about any of this, I've gone through it quickly without putting any data up for you, but happy to share any information that you would need or want as part of your advocacy efforts. So thank you, Kevin, and thank you to the board for asking me to say a few words today, and thank you for all that you're doing.
Well, thank you, Joyce. It was great. And I know that you mentioned the link and the information. Once we get that, we will post it on our website for the upcoming event. So thank you for what you're doing. And I know it's not easy, especially during the pandemic, first we're all trying to learn new technologies to do our jobs from home, and then we're trying to figure out, what is best in each of the counties. As you said, if you've seen one county, you've seen one county. It's just like in our program, we have a ship office in every county, and every one of them is different, even though they're trying to have the same outcome. Like you said, everyone is still different in how they set and run their programs. So you're absolutely right. So it's perfectly fitting that the theme for Older Americans Month is the communities of strength, because we have all had the strength over the past 14 months and continuing to do our jobs. And for those frontline workers who have been amazing to serve every day and what they've done and protect the citizens in their communities, it's amazing. So thank you for joining us today. And I know we'll be in touch with you, and we appreciate all you do. We look forward, we hopefully will be in person next year, Joyce, and we want to have you there. We can give you a hug and give you the standing ovation that you need for all of your hard work. So
Well,
thank you again.
that's awfully kind, Kevin. And yes, I am planning on seeing people very soon. I think I myself have become socially isolated, not being able to interact personally with folks. And so, yes, thank you so much. And I hope you all have a great conference. It looks like a wonderful lineup. So enjoy and learn.
Thank you, Joyce. And before we go to break, I do want to give a few reminders for individuals that we will do the break until 10:55, and then we'll come back, and then you will be put into your breakout rooms. But just let me give you some reminders about that, because as we do go to break, we're going to have some slides playing as well. But what you're going to see is a pop-up box at the bottom of your screen. It's going to ask you to join for your breakout session that you originally registered for. And I know that some folks changed their sessions yesterday, and Allison has worked hard to get everybody ready to go. But just remember, when you do join, you'll go into your breakout room. And while you're in your room, we don't want you to leave the breakout room. Or if you're in the wrong session, what you will do is you hit leave breakout room, and you'll come back to the main room. Allison or myself, we will then put you into the correct room for you, and then we will go from there. But when your session is over, do not select the leave button. We will bring you back into the main room. So don't leave the room. And I know that we have we're calling them a shepherd or a room moderator in each session. So just know that they will give you some instructions in case your session stops a little early for some reason. They will stop you and bring you back into the room. All the sessions will be recorded. So we just want to remind you that we will have those recordings up after the end of the day as we get those in to and posted on the website. So again, you'll be brought back in the session later on. Reminder, when you go to lunch today, just mute your computer. We don't want you to leave the room. We want you to stay on board. So know that as well. So we hope you have a great breakout session. The sessions will go from 11 to 12. So at this time, I'm going to let you go to your break, and we'll have some slides playing. But then remember to click on the join breakout room, which will be down in your bottom right corner. Hey, Connie, good to see you though.
You doing all right, Kevin?
I'm doing great. I hope you are.
We are. We're getting ready to open up our center again, June 1st. I'm so excited.
Wonderful. Congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been 14 months of working alone.
I know. I know you're ready for that. So
Yeah, they all are too. We've seen so much decline in some of our folks
yeah.
over this time. It's just,
Well, I know that
it's
they'll be
sad.
glad to see you. So
Yeah, well, a lot of them do friendly drive-bys.
that's good. That's good that y'all
Yeah,
been
they
able to
come
do
by
that.
to see me, and we did Christmas with them like that, you know, and stuff just to keep them moving.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I see we having plenty folks that are coming back into the main session. We do have a break scheduled from 2 to 2:15. So just know that I'm going to have Autumn to go ahead and turn on our slideshow for the break time. You will have the music. So just know at 2:15 we'll be coming back in to start our afternoon keynote. So please stay tuned. Go ahead and get your quick water break and come back in. So Autumn, I'm going to let you start the slideshow for the afternoon area. will explain trauma-informed is how and is and how to infuse it in their work. Also, she will discuss things to look for to determine an individual's decisional ability awareness. A senior lecturer for the North Carolina State University School of Social Work, Michelle Guarino, earned a Bachelor of Social Work from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington and a Master of Social Work from NYU, New York University. Michelle is a licensed clinical social worker and has worked with gang-affiliated high-risk youth and families since 1996. Michelle began her career as a youth intervention counselor for the New Hanover County Sheriff/Wilmington City Police Gang Task Force, a first of its kind position employing a civilian within law enforcement entity to intervene with gangs and gang members and families. Michelle has developed numerous successful prevention, intervention, diversion, and reentry programs that subsequently were recognized with multiple awards and accolades. Michelle's 23-year work history has focused on working with law enforcement settings and has held titles such as Division Commander, Program Director, Gang Counselor, Crisis Unit Supervisor, and Crisis Negotiation Team. So Michelle, at this moment, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kevin. I am going to share my screen with you guys, and hopefully we can get started. If you cannot see that, just let me know. Awesome. Awesome. You know, when Kevin was reading that, anytime that I know lots of us speak at conferences and things, you hear this laundry list of accomplishments and things you've done. And sometimes it just speaks to me that, wow, I am getting old. So thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that validation of my age. So we're going to talk a little bit about creating a trauma-informed care environment. And for some of you, this may be new information, and for others, this may be a duplication of something you've heard. It also may sound incredibly simple. And what I've found working with trauma is there is not this standardized training that many agencies are offering their employees. There's not this trauma-informed approach that many universities are taking as we're training counselors and psychologists and social workers. So I think one of the best things to do is to start very simple and go through information at a very slow and standard rate, if you will. So trauma-informed care, what it is, and what you'll find is there's a lot of words and a lot of writing here for those of you who like to take notes, and for also those of you who want this presentation. It's a good piece of material to refer back to. But really, trauma-informed care is talking about the agency, the program, the organization, how we advocate, how we lobby, what the community thinks, the stereotypes that are around someone who is a survivor, and how we respond. How do we take the individual's needs and their personal experiences into how we're working with them, from the front desk staff of an agency to those clinicians working directly with them. One thing that is the most important is that there has to be a realization that the trauma is widespread, that it impacts so many facets of a person's life. We have to recognize the signs, the symptoms in trauma, and how that affects secondary and tertiary parts of that particular person's life. We have to know how to respond. We have to have the patience. We have to be able to walk alongside. We have to be able to ask the question, what have you been through? We have to incorporate trauma into our policies, our protocols, our procedures, how it is that we respond, how it is that we start to work with the individual with a trauma-informed lens. And we are always seeking to actively resist re-traumatization. And we want to create an environment where re-traumatization is less likely to occur. So if you know a little bit about trauma-informed care, you will know that there are tons of different concepts around what it is and how to deliver it. This is one of my favorite ways to look at trauma-informed care, and it breaks it down into 6 kind of silos where we can start to look at if we are doing this and in what way, and if not, where's the challenges and how we're meeting these people where they are. The first is safety. Throughout the whole organization, staff and the people and clients that we serve, we have to make sure that we are meeting them in an environment that is physically safe, psychologically safe, and that they feel that this is a space where they can be comforted and start to disclose things when they're ready. We have to create a space full of transparency and trustworthiness. We want to work these into our daily operations, how we communicate with everyone that works in the organization, as well as the clients and their families. We want to build the goal of trust. We want to maintain trust, not only with those that we are serving, but those that they are describing as a support system. Peer support and mutual self-help. These are integral to the organization and service delivery approach. We have to make sure that we have these components so that they feel empowered, they feel advocated for, and that there's the ability for them to reach out to build their coping skills to be able to self-help. Collaboration and mutuality. There is a recognition that healing happens in relationships that are meaningful, sharing of power and decision-making. We all know as clinicians that this is one of our ethical values. We have a client right of self-determination. We mutually meet clients where they are. Goals and objectives, treatment planning is all mutual relationship. So this should not come to any surprise, but this is absolutely a must when we're treating someone from a trauma-informed perspective. Empowerment, voice, and choice. This is when our organization aims to strengthen the staff through training, the client and family members through psychoeducation, and realizes although someone may have been through a particular or specific kind of trauma, that the experience and the response is individual to each particular client and their family members or support system. We have to build upon that. We have to meet them where they are and be able to offer choice in treatment, choice in disclosure, and a voice and advocacy in how it is that they would like to meet this trauma where it is. We also have to consider cultural, historical, and gender issues. We have to move past those stereotypic biases and culturally responsive services, language, leverages. We have to move toward a healing value of traditional cultures, connections, traditions, and recognize that historical trauma is a facet of trauma, and we must address that. Trauma-informed approach is designed, number one, to avoid, re-traumatization. That is number one when we're working with someone who's experienced trauma. We focus on safety first, environmentally, psychologically, whatever that may mean as described by your client to feel safe. And we have to be committed to doing no harm. No harm in that space, no triggering, and no re-traumatization. We have to facilitate participation and meaning involvement of our clients, our families, our trauma survivors. They have to be a part of planning services, programs, treatment, etc. And those components all come together to build this great, beautiful thing of trauma-informed care. So how do we avoid re-traumatization? We hear this quite a bit, that when someone's experienced trauma, we tread very lightly. We know re-traumatization means that we are going to trigger or that we might take them back to that situation or incident. But how do we avoid that? Well, number one, we use psychoeducation. Tell them that you want to know about these hugely important events, but we don't want to take that experience and make them worse. We want to talk about how trauma affects them, affects their nervous system, how we respond, how when we hear, smell, or taste something, it might take us back to that particular situation. Psychoeducation has to be first and foremost. We don't want to dive into a situation and ask them to tell us about that experience. We want to tell them that there is validation, and we want to normalize responses to trauma. This is quite a big chunk of time that we'll be spending with clients is psychoeducation. And if they have family members or a support system that are participating in a therapeutic program with them, offer that same psychoeducation to them. Using containment. This is something that I use quite a bit when someone comes in and they have a lot of trauma, complex trauma, or perhaps are struggling a bit to talk about daily activities because that trauma is just kind of hanging out and they don't know what to do with it. So we identify a receptacle. It could be real, it could be perceived, it could be something that we imagine, but this is a place where they put all these components and we choose one that we're going to spend that time on that day. It helps them compartmentalize in a healthy way. And it teaches them that we don't have to deal with every single thing on our plate. We choose to be the ones to prioritize what is most important to us at that time. And it really helps them cope in a healthy way. Systemic relaxation, grounding, meditation, these are all things that you certainly can teach clients without any kind of certification. Of course, things like yoga, you need a certification, but certainly you can refer them to yoga, discuss the benefits of yoga. You can teach breathing exercises. You can teach mindfulness in imaginative play, anything to help them relax, be able to think more clearly, and become engaged in the present moment of conversation. Appreciate the struggle of these clients. Validate the struggle of these clients. Make sure that you tell them this is their experience, this is their individual journey. Oftentimes, trauma survivors will compare themselves to other people. Appreciate the individual struggle and find that strength that you can offer to them from a strengths perspective standpoint. When we're talking about using information and psychoeducation, we really want to talk about the biology and trauma response. This is one of the biggest indicators of success and moving forward in treatment with someone who's had a trauma experience. So first, you can frame re-experiencing the event. You can talk about how that could disturb sleep, how that could make them hyper-aroused. You talk about the physiological reactions to extreme stress. You don't have to be well versed in this. You don't have to be a doctor. You just have to be you have to know about the physical responses to stress. It could be heart palpitations. It could be something that you're referring them to see their doctor. High blood pressure, headaches, changes in women's cycles. All of these are physical reactions to stress. Communicate that treatment and other wellness activities can improve their overall well-being and their trauma response. Therapy, meditation, exercise, yoga, going for a walk, these can help alleviate those symptoms and be able to help this client think more clearly. Discuss traumatic stress symptoms and their physiological components. It doesn't have to be specific to this client's experience. You're just talking wide, you're talking broad, you're talking that these are research-driven components. When someone has experienced a high level of stress, trauma, complex trauma, these are symptoms that they experience most often. We are trying to normalize this for the client. We want to explain the links between traumatic stress and substance use, if it's appropriate. Oftentimes, you may be seeing a client for substance use disorders, but they haven't disclosed a traumatic event. That's okay. We can do psychoeducation around substance use disorder, and we can just wait and ask questions as appropriate about any kind of history. But we want to do it slow, we want to do it methodical, and we want to understand that there is a high likelihood that this individual has experienced some kind of trauma incident. Again, you've heard me say this probably 12 times already. Normalize those trauma symptoms. For example, explain to the clients that their symptoms are normal. They're not a weakness. You'll hear clients say, I'm crazy, I'm damaged, I'm damaged goods, is something that a client said to me not too long ago. They talk about being flawed and that people don't accept them. Really kind of bring them back in and explain the research, the things that have been done to see the characteristics of a trauma response, to normalize that trauma symptom. So how do we begin? So obviously, when we are working in a crisis situation, we're going to start at the very beginning. This is the moment that this person is actively in this incident, this particular situation that is causing trauma. The crisis, when someone is dealing with crisis, what we know is that we are not there in a time of crisis to figure out the problem, to figure out what has happened to escalate the problem. What we're there to do is to get them down to about the closest that we can get to normal and functioning for them. This is not time sensitive. This is a particular point in time where we're actively engaged in a client who is experiencing a crisis. We want to make them safe and we want to refer them to resources. Then when we get to that resource, let's say that you're a clinician, you are going to begin therapy by building rapport, going back to those components of trauma-informed care, establishing trustworthiness, all of those foundations that we need to build a healthy therapeutic relationship. If we begin therapy by focusing on the trauma story, the risk is high that they will be re-traumatized and it will add injury to the pain that they're already feeling. The early work should be focused on restoring their sense of safety, their connection, their sense of belonging. Their identity even is often one of the marks of restoring that safety. Helping the survivor to discover their strengths, drawing on their own resources, establishing or reconnecting with their support system, and self-regulation. None of these are trauma specific. None of these skills do you have to work on only after you hear their story. These are skills that you can instill while we are patiently waiting for an appropriate time for them to share their story. Only after a client has been able to achieve a reduction in alertness, and we're not asking their symptoms to be completely gone, them to be symptomatic free for an X period of time. We're going to monitor and see a reduction in alertness in their trauma response. We want to see a strengthened awareness of coping skills, their access to resources, using their resources. Then and only then should we consider directly dealing with the trauma story and asking for more information. You're the monitor of that. And it's also something that we need to be very transparent with. We need to engage our clients in that conversation. They are going to self-report their feelings of symptoms and alertness. You're going to ask them questions about their readiness to move forward. This is not something we decide on our own. This is something we decide mutually with our clients. This preparation reduces the odds that reviewing the trauma will cause emotional flooding and re-traumatization. And by asking them and preparing them, that can give them a sense if they're ready or not. Trauma is complex in its impacts and their symptoms and the way that we respond. Therefore, treatment has to be complex. We have to be ready with multiple skills, multiple communications, and multiple responses. We need to strengthen various aspects of their overall well-being, their social skills, their spiritualness, their cognitive ability, their physical symptoms, their emotional readiness, and overall self-regulation. So rule number one, as we're slowly moving through, rule number one is do no harm. We said that in the beginning when we're looking at the components of trauma-informed care. Affirm what the client is experiencing and how they are trying to make sense of it. So what are we doing here? We're really asking them about the story and we're making pauses. Throughout the story, we want to ask them, how does that make you feel? What has happened in this particular situation? How do you make sense of that? You want to monitor how it is that they're perceiving this particular trauma incident. You want to affirm them as an individual and the strength, the courage that they've had in dealing with all these forces in their life and how they are able to go on from here. Many of those trauma survivors that you'll be working with may say, I just can't do it. I'm not ready. I can't go on. They may not be suicidal, but they may just be giving up. This is where you're going to affirm that strength that they've had to this point and their strength to move forward. Offer your client a safe place where they can heal themselves in that safe place. And one of the best analogies that has ever come up is here below, like putting a cast on a broken leg. The cast is to protect the leg from further damage. The cast does not do the healing. The leg gets protection so it can use its own processes to heal itself. And that's what I think about our jobs being. We are that cast. We're protecting, we're providing some guidance, but it really is that client that will heal itself with our help, with our support, with our guidance, as long as we're using trauma-informed skills to do so. So when we talk about how we create this environment, it is incredibly simple to read, but unfortunately, so many agencies don't put these things into practice. So number one, environment of care. So often we walk into a nonprofit or a government run facility, and what we notice first is the appearance, the smell, the sight. Now think about some of the agencies that you may have been in, and how did you feel? Did you feel welcome? Did you feel warm? Did you feel supported? Did you feel safe? Did you feel secure? And when I started asking myself that, a lot of times my answer would be no. There was a distinct, stale neutrality that existed in how it was decorated. There was often a smell that wasn't pleasant, or too much of a smell that was overwhelming. Lots of times we walk to spaces that are not clean, they're not well maintained. Even approaching a building, overgrown bushes, not cared for in the front area, that speaks volumes to someone who desperately wants to have a safe place. We want soothing colors. We want nice, simple decor and paint. And I know that these things aren't always easy. It seems like we have to jump through hoops to paint our offices or for our lobby to be painted, but these are things that the organization needs to push for to do those very simple tasks that provide trauma-informed care for our clients. Overall quiet, sound machines, soft music. These provide two things. Number one is that ambient music, but it also protects confidentiality. Carefully placed psychoeducation information. Oftentimes brochures that are out in the middle of a table where everyone can see who's taken what are not ever taken with the client. We want to make sure that they're available yet discreet, so someone can take information without being judged by those other patrons and clients in that facility of what it is they're taking. Neutral or pleasant aroma. Again, oftentimes there is a overwhelming smell where someone is using diffusers or candles or some kind of just distinct smell. Others, it's stale, it's musty. We often use older buildings. Be very aware of these kinds of things. Individual chairs with discrete seating options, someone who may want to come in and isolate themselves from the others in the lobby, may not sit right next to someone. A clear and welcoming entry sign, a clear and welcoming space when they come in. A very easy way to find who it is they check in with if we're looking at a clinic space. Individual bathroom options. I never really thought about this until I had a client who was sitting in the lobby of an agency who got very overwhelmed, had an anxiety attack, and went to seek a bathroom. But the bathroom that was an option for her was 3 stalls. There was doors on the stalls, but she was very upset about who may hear her. She was sobbing. She didn't want to be asked if she was okay. She was using her skills to get through this anxiety attack. What she really wanted to feel very safe was an individual bathroom. And that's something to consider. I know we can't always change our space that drastically, but it's something to consider and talk with our clients about. Staff appearance. This should be, more common sense than it appears that it is. Good general hygiene. This is something that we want to present, that we want to be professional. We want to have attire that looks professional. It's easy to identify staff members versus just someone coming and going, whether it's a lanyard with a name tag or a polo shirt with the name of the agency, something to easily identify a staff member. Particularly for that client I told you about that was looking for a restroom. She was wanting to tell someone that she was there, that was a staff member, to come get her therapist, but she wasn't sure who in the hallway coming and going actually worked there. There was no lanyard, no identification, no nothing. So she was actively seeking a staff member to get her therapist, but couldn't really figure out who was a staff member. Clothing that fits appropriately, not overly revealing. And yes, we don't want to take away your autonomy and independence in choosing what it is that you wear, but do realize that those who have had some kind of trauma related to sexual inappropriateness, sexual assault, etc., the revealing clothes may be a trigger for them. I had a client whose clothes were ripped off of her. She was very aggressively assaulted. And so to her, if she would always wear clothes that were higher on the neck, she didn't want to see that area at all. So it is highly likely that she could be triggered by someone who had a plunging neckline. So these are things that we have to think about. Religious icons, political icons, discreet jewelry choices. Think about how you arrange your room and your office and what kind of things that you display there. Again, the idea is not to take away your opinion and your autonomy in having these things displayed, but just be very cautious about what it is and what it could mean to someone. I have a colleague who has lots of pictures in her office, as we all do, her children, her animals, things of that nature. And she was seeing a client for marital issues. And she noticed that her client would not stop looking at her desk area. And so she didn't look at it while she was with the client, but she kind of analyzed her desk area after her client left, and thought the only thing there was her computer and some pictures of her family. And so she decided the next time to remove those pictures and anything other than her computer on her desk. When the lady came back in for the next appointment, she was a little bit upset. She was a little put off. And so my friend asked her, "Why is it that you seem a little overwhelmed today?" And she said, "I was really looking forward to seeing those pictures there. I was really looking forward to seeing those pictures there. I really enjoyed looking at those pictures. It gave me a lot of hope." So in that conversation, asking very minimal questions, it led to this particular lady disclosing that she had had some miscarriages. She had longed for a family. Her husband did not want to discuss any kind of alternatives to a pregnancy. So that really was a trigger for her. Seeing that family and see that idealization that she really wanted became a trigger for her. Staff behavior. Far too often, I think we forget, when we're not in our offices, when we're in our lobby, our hallway, maybe in the elevator, even in the parking lot, we're still in eye shot of our clients. They see how we're handling ourselves. They see how we're interacting with each other. And we want to be very aware of these kinds of things. We want to demonstrate proper manners and respect for one another. We want to respond to requests for help, even if it's not our client. If we have someone in the hallway who's asking directions or seems to be having a really challenging time, we want to check in with them. We want to do it quietly. We want to do it as discreetly as possible, but we're not doing them any favors by just continuing to mind our business and going on to wherever it is we were going. We want to speak in clear, normal tones. Oftentimes we find ourselves speaking differently, using different language, different adjectives, speaking softer or louder when we're dealing with someone with trauma. We want to make eye contact when it's appropriate. This is where our cultural competence comes in. We have to know the clients that we're working with. And if you don't know, ask. Oftentimes we see ourselves as a social worker extraordinaire and that we should know everything about every culture, and we don't. And we just need to ask those questions. Would you like me to give you a handshake? Is it okay if I make eye contact with you? Can you tell me a little bit about what is culturally preferred for you? That's a simple question that gets a lot of that out of the way. I know that we have rough days, we have hard clients, we work in agencies where we might feel unappreciative, but still smiling and demonstrating a pleasant demeanor means the world to clients, especially when they're struggling with trauma. Be very mindful of confidentiality in open common spaces such as the lobby. Oftentimes those who are administrative secretaries, billing, HR, they are there up front and they're managing clients coming in, and oftentimes those conversations are said very loud. There's information that is given that should not be given, and those things can really cause a negative trauma response. Open physical stance makes sure that we're keeping in mind our nonverbal gestures and our body language, keeping our nodding and make sure that our nonverbal skills are there. Initiate greetings, offer water, don't eat in front of clients. I know oftentimes we have back-to-back days and we had an emergency and we're just getting down to eat something, but it's not appropriate to do that with our clients. And I know that many of you are probably thinking, these are so simple, and these are things that I clearly don't do, but so many do, and that's why we're talking about them today. Be open to change. Be open to constructive feedback in how it is that you are working with clients. That cultural competence again, and nonverbal gestures and staff conversations. I've had so many clients over here, conversations between staff. And they feel as though that might be happening about them, where staff is talking about someone in the lobby or a client that they just saw, and my clients are wondering, wow, are they doing that about me? So we want to make sure that that's not happening. From an organizational perspective, we have to make sure that trauma-informed care is important, that there is a trauma policy and philosophy in place organizationally, that there is a procedure and a policy that is available for the employees, that there is training that is available. There has to be a commitment that is articulated to be trauma informed from the top down. All staff, clients, family members, supports are taught about trauma and its impact. It's hard to be trauma informed if you're not given the appropriate tools to be effective and be able to teach this. Incorporate a universal trauma screening for all clients, period. It doesn't matter if they say or don't say that there has been a trauma experience. It doesn't mean that you have to know or you don't know that there's been a trauma experience. This is universally given to every client that comes into your agency. Trauma status continually assessed. Many times clients, when given a trauma screening, they know what's being asked and they're not ready to disclose. So their answer may be no, no, no. So periodically we're going to check in about trauma. We're going to ask questions about trauma, because after we've offered this safe and healthy and secure environment, there might be a disclosure, but we have to assess for that and we have to give them the space to talk about it. There has to be a clear organizational plan for dealing with behavioral crisis. I cannot say how many agencies that I've consulted with that there is no safety plan for staff. There is no staff or administrative policy on dealing with a behavioral crisis, period. That has to be in place. There has to be discrete areas in your organization for calming clients or for crisis management. These are areas that are truly trauma informed, from the environment to the staff dealing with this issue. Feedback valued. So oftentimes we give our clients surveys and we ask about how we're doing. Well, it doesn't matter if we give the survey and we ask if we don't incorporate that into some of our policies and how we do business. We have to have concerted efforts to reach these clients where they want to be met. And I have just some helpful links throughout here. When you guys are able to access the PowerPoint, I think would be a very valuable resource for you. Treatment considerations reflect the client's preferences. That could be from their cultural traditions and beliefs to where they want to work first. They're integrated across the disciplines. We have to have a multidisciplinary approach when we're working with a survivor of trauma. Consent for treatment is explained far too often, even in our non-trauma informed care environments. We are not explaining the treatment consent exchange forms. This has to be fully explained to be able to work in a multidisciplinary way. Offer choice of treatment provider when possible. Sometimes it is just who you represent that causes a barrier between the client and being able to work on trauma. It could be me as a white female is triggering to my client. I don't need them to tell me that, but I need to ask a question. Are you okay with me as your provider? We have other alternatives if someone else would be a better fit for you. I'm not asking them to tell me what's wrong. I'm not asking them to explain to me why I'm not a good fit. I'm giving them choice in being able to choose a provider they feel most comfortable with. We have to realize that it's not about us, it's about perhaps what I represent for them in their trauma story. Using everyday language, staying away from acronyms, therapeutic language without explanation, etc. Respond to all statements of abuse. This is oftentimes a way that someone is trying to make a disclosure that happened maybe previously, and they're making this statement of abuse about the present day. It could not be factual at all, or it very well could be factual and it's ongoing abuse, and we have to take all statements very seriously. We have to be sensitive to the seating configuration of our office, the proximity of us sitting with them. If you're conducting family therapy, make sure you have options for seating. You want to be able to allow the client and the family members to sit where they're most comfortable and with the distance that they would like. Co-occurring treatment needs assessed. You need to look at co-occurring disorders along with trauma and make sure you specialize or can refer to a specialization in that area. Again, culture of origin respected and incorporated into the planning. Recognize the importance of physical boundaries. Offer to them a handshake. If they say no, that's fine, move on. Offer a high five. Offer no touch at all. Just make sure that they are a part of that decision making. We have to realize that oftentimes trauma survivors feel so much out of control that even a very small choice can be a big deal to the trauma survivor. Recognize the importance of social boundaries, joke telling, storytelling, innuendo. These can convey risk or threat, or it can be taken in a way that obviously you didn't intend, or it could be overheard and there's no communication with you all. And now that joke or that innuendo has been taken as that person perceives it, and that could be really dangerous. So one of the things that I want you to walk away from this training today, if the only thing, is this slide right here. This is probably the most important question in how you frame it. This trauma-informed is a shift in how we ask questions. We're going from what's wrong with you to asking what has happened to you. And you can see just in that slight change of language, we're really taking any ownership off of that client. What has happened to you? It means something has been put upon you. What's wrong with you can sometimes convey ownership or blame. And so just that simple way of asking a question is a huge way to start your trust and your rapport with your client. And you can see here the trauma-informed wheel, as I call it. All of these things, again, are part of the components that we talked about early on. And I have shared this with my clients before, and I've talked about what each one of those circles means and what I'm going to do as their clinician in meeting each one of those. And I ask them to engage with me and tell me what it is that they could do in each one of these circles where we can have a really healthy relationship in moving forward. This sets a precedent that we are working on trauma, maybe without talking about the specific trauma at that time, and that I am going to provide these particular things to them, and mutually, they're going to provide these things to themselves. Building resiliency. There's a toolkit that is awesome. It's based off of ACEs. There's a link there for you. But I want to talk just for a second about secondary traumatic stress. So when we're working in this environment where we're dealing with trauma and crisis so often, it behooves us to make sure that the number one priority is us. This is where we get to be a little bit selfish. It takes me back to something that a lot of our grandmas used to say: if you don't love yourself, then no one else is going to love you, right? Well, the same goes for here. If we don't care for ourselves first, we're not going to be able to care for those that are coming in with trauma and other related issues. We have to be intentional about vicarious trauma. We have to have an organizational stand that makes support available for all the employees. There has to be a recognition of the impact on secondary trauma. This is huge. And more often than not, recently, I've been asked to speak about secondary trauma and what that looks like as a social worker or helping professional. This is huge right now, especially coming out of a 14-month pandemic. Recognizing exposure to trauma is a risk of the job serving traumatized children and families, and it should be acknowledged. There's nothing worse than being told it's just part of your job. You signed up for this. No, you signed up to be supported and to be maintained as a valuable worker within this job. Understand that trauma can shape the culture of organizations in the same way that trauma shapes the individuals that we're working with. Think about morale. Think about the lack of support versus a lot of support. It changes the culture and the environment in which we work. Develop the capacity to translate trauma-related organizations and knowledge into meaningful, action-oriented policy, and improve that practice within the organization as a whole. Not just a few units, not just a few departments, not just a few people, but as a whole, so that it is known that there is that support and there's a capacity to realize the symptoms and the exposure of trauma. Be integrated into direct services, programs, policies, all of it. Like I just said, the whole shebang. It has to be training facilitation. There has to be staff development. There has to be activities directed at secondary traumatic stress. If we don't talk about it and we don't acknowledge it, then as an employee, you often feel like it doesn't exist and it's taboo for you to bring it up, okay? This is a really, really good organizational chart about trauma-informed care. Again, it has to start at the top. The senior leaders must prioritize trauma-informed care. They demonstrate it through offering training, through their behavior. They model that for their employees. They give priority to trauma-informed care. Then it goes to support staff. They're given training, coaching, supervision, debriefing, everything around trauma and crisis, and they discuss work-life balance, self-care, things that really start to incorporate that coping ability. That translates into listening more effectively and actively to the clients and families. Clients and families are consulted and included in their own self-care plans. And you see how this works. There's a nice flow. The leaders are able to recognize it. They're passing that off to staff. Staff is healthy and in a good place, feeling very supported. They pass that on to the families. And then that is passed on to a data or non-judgmental regulated share with staff and used to motivate continued improvement. So this is a cycle. It continues. And then we continue to align our policy and practice of trauma-informed care organization-wide. In the organization, a few things that we do want to incorporate as we're looking at policy is adequate clinical supervision, making sure there's time to debrief, to process, reflect. This is where we really are able to talk about and process our trauma, our cases, our clients, our workload. We want to maintain a trauma caseload balance, making sure that just because somebody's really good with this population, they're not carrying all of the trauma survivor caseload. We want to support workplace, peer-related self-care groups. We want to enhance the physical safety of our staff, offering flexible scheduling, caseload caps. We want secondary traumatic stress training for our clinical staff, our administrative staff, all of our staff, our clinical staff, our non-clinical staff. Everyone needs to understand. Train our organizational leaders, let me back up, on organizational implementation and assessment. How am I able to incorporate trauma-informed care into my organization? It sounds like a really great idea, but how do I do it? We need to make sure there's an assessment there. And providing an ongoing assessment of staff risk and resiliency. For yourself, without your organization being involved, use supervision, consult with a colleague, make sure that you're processing with someone appropriate. Increase your self-awareness. Oftentimes, we don't want to be aware of what secondary traumatic stress looks like for fear that we are feeling it. Maintain your healthy work-life balance. And I know that those are so easy words to say, but it's harder to do. And I think what I'm asking here is that you guys just become aware of it. Exercise, good nutrition, sleeping, staying connected, particularly staying connected with your friends and family who are not in the helping profession. That does wonders for my self-care. Develop and implement plans of personal wellness, resiliency. Take a risk and resiliency inventory for yourself. We're so good at giving them to our clients. Take one yourself. Do a self-awareness wheel. Start looking at how you're doing and not just asking clients how they're doing. Look at risk reduction, how self-care routines are working or not working. Use your EAP. And if you can, participate in a buddy system, someone that you work with, someone that is a colleague, to make sure that you're holding each other accountable. So screening tools, we don't have the time to get into these today, but I did want to provide you guys with some resources. These are some of my favorites, some that are widely used, particularly in outpatient types of settings. And then treatment for trauma, just a few trauma-focused CBT is evidence-based. I know a lot of you work in agencies where you have to have an evidence-based practice. It's components-based treatment model that incorporates trauma-sensitive intervention with CBT. It brings in family. It's proven successful with children and adolescents. This is one of the hardest populations to reach when we're talking about trauma and all of the hormonal changes, developmental phases that this age group is going through. This has been proven to be very, very successful. This works for complex trauma, a single event trauma, or multiple traumas in their life. EMDR, this is something that I know many of you are probably familiar with. However, the caveat here is no one just needs to go to EMDR. What needs to happen, and there needs to be some monitoring, there needs to be some disclosure, there needs to be readiness to talk about and process the trauma event. So this is something that's highly successful, but we don't just assess for trauma, find out there's been trauma, and throw our client into EMDR. This is very much for someone who is working with a therapist, and we are making sure that they are actively ready for EMDR and to retell their story. So these are, again, some helpful resources. There are a lot of these out there. The links that I provided to you guys are all toolkits, evidence-based work here. There's some continuing education there in the first link, but I just wanted to provide some more information for you guys, for you to go into a little bit more depth with trauma. And that is going to conclude my piece for today. I hope that I was on time. I tend to like to talk a little bit too much, so I think I'm on time, and I appreciate all of you being here and for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Garino, for your presentation. I think we have a few questions in the chat, and
Sure.
And so I ask them now. So what are some tips on how to apply these? What are some tips on how to apply these tips when the person is already in crisis mode? They may not be able to listen, reason as effectively. And I think that question came up earlier in your presentation. So
Yes. So when someone's in active crisis, we obviously are not going to ask them to tell the story. You then are just dealing with that crisis. When you think about a crisis or someone being in crisis, it is present moment only. We're not going to talk about their relationship with their mom when they were 5. We're not going to talk about 2 weeks ago or 2 weeks in the future. We are present in that moment, and we're with that client as they're going through this crisis. So we're only focused on just that crisis and the symptoms of that crisis, if that makes sense. So if someone is experiencing, I'm trying to think about a good story to use. If someone is experiencing self-harm, they're not suicidal, and we know that that has a direct correlation to previous trauma, and this is the crisis at hand, is that they're self-harming, they've never self-harmed before, we're not going to ask that client to engage in discussion about trauma. We're going to give psychoeducation. We're going to assess the self-harm that's happening in that moment and resource whatever's the most appropriate action for that self-harm, keeping them de-escalated or de-escalate them from where they are, and just monitor that moment. I hope that helps.
Okay. All right. The next question we have is, many older people have long-standing unaddressed trauma and are now experiencing cognitive disorders. Do you have some techniques that might be used in these situations? Often behaviors, quote unquote, are mistaken for coping.
Right. And you know, the very unique piece of that question is oftentimes behaviors are coping skills that have been learned throughout their interaction with others from the time they experience the trauma. There's many aging adults that experienced trauma 40, 50 years ago. The unfortunate part about that with the aging process and distortion in their memories, the story is not going to be the story that it really was. I know that was a very strange way to get to that point. So oftentimes you, again, very much like someone in crisis, have to stay with them in that moment. So if they're displaying behaviors, we don't think about asking a aging adult, why are you doing that? That seems like such a childish or adolescent question. Why are you behaving this way? But oftentimes that is the best conduit of information. It's just simply asking, why are you having these behaviors? Why are you slapping the pills out of your nurse's hand? And although you might not get a great story of what happened to them 30 years ago, it gives you that trust between they just want to tell a story. It may not be the accurate story, but they just want to tell a story. And I've had aging adults say, I'm just mad. And so we talk about feeling angry, and a lot of times it has a direct correlation to the trauma, but it's more in the terms of, I don't feel independent. I don't feel autonomous. I don't feel like I have the ability to make decisions. And, you know, the nurse just coming in and telling me to take these pills, I just slapped them out of her hand because it felt good. So that's where you stay with the aging adult. There are some that have a really good recollection, although we would never know if it's true or not, about a trauma event. And again, whether it is real or perceived, factual or not, sometimes just offering them that space to tell you the story is symptom relief enough for that aging adult. They likely don't have the support system that they did. Maybe family members are deceased. Some of them are seeing their supports and their friends be buried. And so it's very lonely. And oftentimes they just want to tell a story. And it's not our job to be the fact checker on it, but just allow them to tell the story. And you might see some behaviors decrease, some negative behaviors decrease once they're able to process and vent that story with you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but does anyone else have any questions? I think we have about 3 minutes left, so just a few minutes. But if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. If you feel comfortable taking your mic off, or I mean, turning your mic on, I'm sorry, or turning your camera on, then you can do that as well.
Hey, Tadra, this is Kevin. Actually, I saw a message in the chat, and I was going to just let Michelle know this, and maybe she may want to respond on it. It says a friend in another state who counsels people in crisis is required by her county to have a relationship with a personal therapist and see that therapist at least once a year. And I just thought I would ask you your response on that. To me, it sounds great, but I just thought
Yeah. It does sound great because, I'm going to give you kind of my personal opinion. Where we really see change when we're working with someone who's had a trauma experience, we're about the 12-month mark. That's really where you start to see commitment to change. That could obviously change from person to person. That also sounds like there could be a situation where this person has found themselves in criminal court. And because that is not the good place for someone who's experienced trauma, there might be a bench order or a court order for them to participate in some kind of treatment programming for up to a year or more in lieu of being charged. And we see that a lot in North Carolina. I work with our court system, those who have mental health concerns, those who've experienced trauma and have had some symptoms that result in poor decision making or criminality, will often advocate with the judge presiding and say, can they enter into therapy in lieu of criminal charges? And that is very successful. And there is a time stamp on that. North Carolina does not have any kind of just arbitrary, without them being criminally involved, kind of stamps of time for someone to participate in therapy. However, I think that's an excellent point. I know that some of my programs that I've built for gang involved kids, because the time for change is really about 12 months, I ask them to participate for 12 months. And if they don't participate for the full 12 months and they decide that they want to get out of the program, they have to start over at 12 months, because really, or at month 1 for 12 months, because really when you start to see that change is at that 12-month mark. So I'm not real sure what state and what kind of criteria.
Michelle?
Yes.
Michelle, that was not what I was saying. I have a friend
okay.
who's got a master's degree in counseling, and she counsels in the school system. And as part of her job requirement, they require that she maintain a relationship with a therapist and see that therapist once a year. And I know North Carolina is probably not moving to that, but I think since there is money now, that needs to be examined, because you can't really treat people if you're hurting.
Exactly. Yes, that makes more sense now, but it was very interesting either way. But I do think that we need some kind of, I don't know if it would be a policy or what. I think we really need to look at the availability of therapy for those who are giving therapy. Right now, it's just, I'll go see one if I need one. There needs to be that commitment to have a place to process. And really, honestly, after you get your license, I mean, you have that, post 2 years of work where you're getting that weekly supervision. After that, when you're fully licensed, when you probably need it the most, there is nothing that's holding us accountable to that therapy. And Lisa, I love that. And I think we need to incorporate that. So anybody that's doing lobbying and that kind of work, I see peer support. Yes, peer support is a great thing. Unfortunately, peer support teams are more widely available for law enforcement and first responders. One of the driving forces behind peer support teams is the fire departments in North Carolina. They have a wonderful, wonderful program of peer support. And then we have what's called CISM teams, it's crisis intervention teams that are deployed when there's been a pretty major incident to go out to first responders and us as helping professionals and debrief us as people who were not directly tied to that event. So there are resources, but we don't, I wish we had more, I guess is the best way to end that note.
Yes. Yes. I see there are comments in the chat about we lose great social workers in CPS and APS because of untreated secondary trauma and burnout. Absolutely.
All the time.
I can imagine. So I think we're at 3:17 now, but if anyone has maybe a question for Ms. Garino, please feel free to type it in the chat. She may have time to answer maybe one more, even though we're already over time. But it seems like this presentation has been very helpful to a lot of people. So we want to make sure that if you have any questions that you have time to answer or get answers for your questions. All right, I don't think we have any more at this time. Thank you, Ms. Garino, for presenting to us this afternoon. It was a great presentation, very timely given the pandemic and all the things that have happened this past year. So thank you so much for being willing to join us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tadra and Michelle, for both your presentation. It was a wonderful job. And we saw lots of great comments in the chat saying, wonderful presentation. I think we're going to have you back next year. Hopefully we'll be in person so that we can have you. I think you can talk on secondary trauma probably for a whole nother hour as well. So I think we, for the conference committee, I think we already have a topic for next year already.
Well, thank you. I'd be happy to. I love face-to-face so much better than virtual, but kudos to you guys for continuing to hold this, and thank you guys for everyone who attended.
Thank you. And as we do wrap up today, we do have several things we want to talk about before we end for the day, and to give you some reminders as we do go into our final day for tomorrow. So remember, tomorrow morning you will get another link or another email from Allison Crossman giving you the link for the day's session. Remember, that link is your individual link, so do not forward that to anyone else, but use it for your own self. And you may have put it on your calendar as well. We have several reminders. I just want to thank, first of all the speakers from today. We had wonderful presentations. We had lots of great questions from you all in the audience. We want to appreciate and thank you for being a part of that. I want to again thank our sponsors today, AARP for helping us do financial support to make this conference free of charge, and the North Carolina Senior Medicare Patrol Program. Also, all the board members that are on board, from Pam Palmer, our treasurer, to Laura Schlabach, who is our secretary, and Elmore with the Secretary of State's office. She and Tadra are conference co-chairs, and we appreciate all that they have done. John Mary and Stephanie Bias with our not communications, but with educating folks and awareness. Nancy Warren, who is our past president, and she also does advocacy. And let's see, who am I leaving out? Autumn Cox. I just want to say a wonderful thank you to Autumn. As you probably saw in the chat feature, Autumn has already got all the presentations from today already loaded onto our website, and she has done a tremendous job. And I just want to thank her. And she also noted in that chat feature that she will have the recordings up as soon as possible. That does take a little time for her to get those loaded up with all the features. And I failed to mention Laura Cockman, who is our chair. She could not be with us for the conference, but we want to thank her for all that she does for us. Without her, we wouldn't have such a great board already. But I want to appreciate that. And again, I'm looking at the chat real quick because Allison made a comment to everybody. Remember, the conference link is unique to you, so please do not share it, as it will impact your ability to earn CEUs. Your link is the same for all 3 days. Therefore, you can use the link that's right now for tomorrow, but you'll also get that email tomorrow as well. Couple of final things. Remember our NCPAAA website. Just know that you're welcome to go there and check out membership information, learn how that you would like to get involved and become on the board, even potentially become a board member. So we would love to have you as well. I know that we have others that were on the committee for the education committee. Tomorrow I'll talk more about those individuals, Paula Cohort, Roger Manis, Catherine Lanier from the Department of Health and Human Services with the Division of Age and Adult Services. All of those folks have been of tremendous help in getting this getting this conference off the ground and getting it on board. So thank you very much. Final thoughts and reminders. We've had a great day. I can't believe, I know that there's always some technical glitches. Even when you're at an in-person conference, we still have things that may happen behind the scenes. And but I know when it's a virtual conference, things may happen more, live, and you may see those. But just know that this has been a very successful day. I know that at one time we had more than 160 people at one given time on the conference. So this has been a great job. Oh, and I forgot to mention Meredith Stone Smith with the UNC School of Government. She was also on our education committee. Thank you, Ann Elmore, for throwing that list out to me. So again, we are going to end here at just a little early for today, but we do want to remind you, join us tomorrow morning, 9:30 sharp. We want to start on time so that we can get it kicked off, as we have some more wonderful speakers tomorrow, and you'll learn about more great subject matters, and then more wonderful breakout sessions as well. And also, Ann has reminded me, I can't forget, I got to mention Dr. Karen Bullock with the UNC School of Social Work that helped us out with the education part as well. So again, thank you for today's sessions and for attending. We hope to see you tomorrow, and have a great day. Thank you.